I'm Marcus. Lila, my wife, and I go way back to our college days. We were in the same class. After graduation, we both landed jobs, lived the engaged life for a couple of years, then moved in together before tying the knot. But somewhere along the line, Lila changed. We used to split chores and living costs, each pulling our weight. After getting married, though, Lila started slacking off, and before I knew it, she wasn't doing anything at home. It didn't matter how much I tried to talk to her, chores were out of the question and she stopped pitching in for bills. Then out of the blue, she quit her job and started living it up on my dime. And that's when she did something that really got my goat. A year into our marriage, Lila decided to switch from full-time to part-time work. Her reasoning? She wanted us to start trying for a kid. Now, I didn't have a problem with that, but she didn't bother discussing it with me. Anytime I asked, she'd give me some half-baked answer and dodge the topic, which left me honestly scratching my head. I remember asking her, "Lila, I got why you shifted to part-time work, but why didn't you talk to me about it? I don't exactly rake in the big bucks, you know. If we have a kid, it's gonna be tough." To be honest, I really wanted to let her have it, but I learned the hard way that an angry Lila is a headache. Once, I made the mistake of eating some ice cream she'd bought, and she gave me this icy stare, ranting about me stealing what she got to unwind after a hard day. I was dumbfounded. I'd never seen this side of her, and it shook me up. Something in me was screaming that this wasn't good, a feeling about her that I couldn't put into words. So, if I wanted to keep the peace and handle this smoothly, I had to swallow my pride. We'd already spread the news of our marriage to both sets of parents and sent out wedding invites to our friends. There was no turning back. Then, out of nowhere, something happened. It was about a debt Lila had been hiding. My parents graciously footed the bill for my college tuition, and I was aware that she had student loans. When we tied the knot, I was fully prepared for her monthly payments of around $200. The real kicker, though, was her revolving payments, which spiraled into a vortex of debt. The ugly truth came out when a postcard from her credit card company showed up one day. She had always played it cool, assuring me that her credit limit was a modest $1,000 and that she rarely used her card, so I didn't fret over it. But then there was this nagging feeling I couldn't shake off. So behind her back, I peeked at the postcard, and boy, was I in for a shock. She had chalked up thousands of dollars in debt, only making minimum payments of $20 a month, and the interest was piling up at an alarming rate. I confronted her right on the spot. "Oh, you figured it out, huh? We're married now, so your debts are mine, and vice versa. I want to concentrate on getting pregnant, so I've quit my job. You'll have to take care of the payments, Marcus." Just like that, she shrugged the whole burden onto me. That's when I realized Lila had even stopped her part-time work and had settled into the role of a full-time housewife. To add insult to injury, she was enjoying my hard-earned money more frequently. I was livid at her audacity and rebutted vehemently. "Wait, what? That's just not fair. This debt is yours from before we got married. Why should I be responsible? You keep talking about getting pregnant, but you're not even making an effort. You've been sidestepping any romantic moments with me lately." Perhaps it was the outpour of pent-up frustration that left me panting. Even Lila, who was so used to my cool-headed nature, was taken aback. But then she burst into tears, her face flushed and lashed out at me. "I don't care about you anymore, Marcus. I might as well divorce you." Grabbing her phone and wallet, she stormed out of our home. A moment of regret washed over me, but I quickly shook it off. I was certain I hadn't said anything wrong. Nevertheless, she and I fell into a state of Cold War, even with our wedding day fast approaching. At this rate, we might seriously call it quits. If we had to call the whole thing off, we needed to decide now, or it would create chaos for our parents and friends. So, I braced myself to have that crucial conversation with her. But when I came back from work that day, she was gone. Instead, an unfamiliar brochure lay on the table. Without much thought, I picked it up and started leafing through it. Looks like it was all about a trip to LA. I was casually leafing through a brochure when a slip of paper dropped onto the floor. Picking it up, I realized it was some kind of accommodation ticket. I couldn't help but crack a smile. Maybe Lila had been secretly putting this together as a peace offering. I held on to this glimmer of hope and didn't care about who was footing the bill for the trip. I just yearned to rekindle things with the woman I once loved, to dream of a future where we could raise our kids together. Banking on her better judgment, I was let down flat. She was back home before long. I was half expecting her to bring up the trip, but her words threw me for a loop. "So the first weekend of next month, I'm going on a trip to LA with friends. I won't be around, just eat whatever's in the house," she said without even a glance my way. Even I could put two and two together. The 2 accommodation tickets, her avoiding my gaze, and her hurried speech. I wasn't thick enough to not see through her lies. With a heavy heart, I let go of the frail hope I had been nursing and made up my mind to get the ball rolling for a divorce. She was reliant on my paycheck and was splurging my money on her trip, so she wasn't likely to bring up divorce anytime soon. This gave me time to quietly dig into her betrayal. And then the day of Lila's adulterous trip came around. Long story short, I decided to tail her without her knowing. I had gotten wind of her destination from the brochure, and I remembered her place to stay. So when I checked with the hotel for any vacant rooms, they had just one left. It was a tad costly for a single person, but I couldn't let this opportunity slip considering Lila and her fling would be lodging at the same hotel. I kept on her tail without her being any the wiser, capturing their dialogues and the journey's events. I was determined not to leave any room for excuses. My only concern was the possibility of Lila's lover being from the seedy underworld. His imposing stature, clearly a tough cookie, covered in tattoos, and a towering figure well above 6'4". His eyes had a piercing sharpness, something out of the ordinary. The sight of Lila's lover took me aback a little, but backing out now was not an option. So despite the strain, I endeavored to collect whatever evidence I could of her antics. When the night of that day came, my room ended up being right next to theirs. I was taken by surprise when I was shown my room, but thanks to the thin walls, I could hear everything from her room. Her saccharine voice resonating in my eardrums stirred a wave of nausea in me. She was technically still my wife. I didn't think that just hearing her voice could churn my stomach this much. I suppose I no longer see her as my wife. All I felt was a deep-seated resentment and revulsion. As the night wore on, Lila and her boyfriend were having a blast, taking advantage of their corner room. Part of me wanted to charge in there immediately, but I managed to contain my rage, focusing my energy on recording instead. Then I heard a voice saying, "Really, my husband is just a washout as a man." The second Lila said that, I lost it and hit the wall without thinking. Realizing my mistake, I quickly took my hand off the wall and glanced nervously towards their room. Just then, a thunderous bang echoed through the otherwise silent room from their side. "Hey, keep it down! If you mess with us again, it's gonna be your funeral!" The man shot back rudely. I didn't respond. I simply stayed silent and let the time roll on. After some time, I heard Lila's voice again. As I fought to keep my rising nausea at bay, I listened closer and heard the two speaking in hushed, intimate tones. Eventually, my stomach couldn't handle it anymore. I made a mad dash to the bathroom, purging all my intense emotions, pain, anger, and sorrow, until I was left feeling hollow. Once I collected myself, I was surprisingly calm and almost unconsciously found myself dialing Lila's number. A little while later, Lila picked up, sounding rather peeved. "Hey, I'm in the middle of a card game with my friends. Can you quit bothering me? You really have no idea when you're being a nuisance, do you?" At that, I couldn't help but laugh and let her in on the secret. "That friend of yours is a guy, and you're doing more than just having fun. You're sorely mistaken if you think I'm clueless." Lila suddenly went silent, as if at a loss for words. After a pause, she shot back defensively. "Why don't you just go home? He's way more skilled than you ever were." While her words left me dumbfounded, the man, who had apparently been listening in, snatched the phone away and threatened me. "Hey, punk! You're staying next door, aren't you? I can hear you. I'll make you understand who you're dealing with, so get over here." Saying that, he slammed the wall with all his might to emphasize his point. But I'd already purged all my emotions earlier, and I wasn't scared of anything anymore. I acknowledged his request and stepped outside, where predictably, this tough-looking man was standing, glowering at me. The instant our eyes locked, he grabbed me by the collar. "I'm part of the mafia you scumbags fear. Lila's mine now. You understand what happens if you touch her, right?" He tried to intimidate me, but I effortlessly shrugged him off. The man was stunned to be so easily bested by someone smaller than him. That's when I threw some truth his way. "So what? What if I told you I'm pals with your boss? You be the one in danger. And you think stealing my girl and trying to intimidate me with such a lousy strategy is gonna work? Don't make me laugh." Keeping my face impassive, I gripped his collar, and the man quickly capitulated. "Wait, stop. I get it. I'll give Lila back to you." He sputtered, his face turning pale. He might have talked big about being part of the mafia, but he was just a small-time flunky. The real deal here is me. I'm actually acquainted with the top boss. I never let Lila in on this little secret. I grew up in the slums, so the mafia and I go way back. When I dropped that bombshell, the guy was rattled, realizing my ties with this organization, and he shoved Lila into the spotlight. Lila was clueless and panicked, tossed into the hallway in her birthday suit. I snuck a peek into the room. It was a pig pen, littered with all sorts of junk. It made me cringe, and honestly, I felt a wave of revulsion towards Lila. Then there was Lila, shocked out of her wits. She'd be under the impression that her mobster beau was invincible and that I didn't stand a chance. But he dished her in a flash. She overheard our chat and came up to me stammering an apology. Marcus, I'm sorry. It was my fault. But I wasn't about to forgive and forget. My temper was on a short fuse that night, and I was seething. I can't do this anymore, Lila. Let's get a divorce, and I expect compensation. If you think about running, know this. I will not stop until I catch you. I glared at her as I said this. Lila squeaked, then fumbled to open the door to the room where her lover had fled to. But it was locked, and her face turned sheet white. It was hilariously pathetic. After tossing Lila a mocking grin, I retreated to my room, locked the door, and slept. I didn't hear a peep from Lila that night, and it was blissfully quiet. A few days later, I served Lila with the divorce papers and a claim for damages. She was to sign and agree. Her lover boy was hauled in by the bosses I was familiar with. He looked reduced and terrified. He left a hefty sum of money, mumbled, "I'll take responsibility for this guy," and was whisked away. Watching all this unfold, Lila trembled like a leaf and stammered, I'll pay the damages, but I'm out of a job and broke." When I hinted that if she didn't cough up the full amount pronto, she might end up like her boyfriend, she transferred the money in no time, likely by getting into debt. A friend told me Lila's now working in the nightlife industry, doing whatever it takes to earn money for her debts. It adds up. My compensation alone was $30,000. That's not something you can pay off with a casual effort, considering her student loans and revolving payment interests. When it came out that she was in cahoots with the mafia, she got the boot from her club and became jobless. She couldn't afford her rent and got evicted from her apartment. Now she's homeless, living on the streets, surviving on the mercy of passerby. Hearing all this, I felt a surge of satisfaction, as clear as a bright sunny day. As for me, I'm still plugging away at the daily grind like any regular Joe, but I've had it with marriage. For the foreseeable future, I'm all set to bask in the glory of bachelorhood.